Darwin is dead, and here is why. The idea of speciation was not novel to Darwin's book on the origin of species. No, it was not. In fact, Linneaus, when he assigned his Latin two-word definitions or groupings to specific plants and animals, Linneaus assigned both ape and man to the same taxonomic order. So Darwin is not the originator of the concept of speciation. Darwin instead added one interesting thing to the conversation, and this was the idea of gradual descent. So he said that there should be a gradual through adaptive processes, which he said in 2 different chapters of his book were mutations and changes in the basic structure of the animal, which today we would call genetics. We say that genetics are the basis of the genotype begets the phenotype of an animal. So Darwin, without knowing it, was talking about genetics. And so anyway, he said there will be a gradual descent. So in this graph, you can see in the yellow that I am just suggesting, this is completely my invention this morning, a kind of corrective bit of math, a fraction, if you will, of whatever fossils entered the record or became buried with the full expectation that they would eventually be a fossil, that some loss occurs over time. So I've just made up a number of reduction, a half-life of 1 million years, so that every million years, a half of whatever entered the fossil record is lost through some flood, volcano, fire, some kind of event. We don't know. But it's just loss. So I'm allowing that there's some loss, and I think that's a reasonable expectation. So next, my next assumption is that the dates assigned to different fossils that have been claimed as representations of proof for Darwin's theory are actually correct. So I use these dates to kind of assign some time to the x-axis of my graphs here. So now you multiply the corrective factor times what Darwin predicted, and this produces the green map below. So on the right, I've put a column of x's. Now I'm just saying that whatever amount of modern fossils, whatever amount of fossils of men have entered the fossil record, I'm just calling that 1. And that's what you get there on the right side of the graph. So it's just a unity graph, and that's just 1. So now if you look to the left, you see a couple small x's. Now, sometimes these might be up to 20 claimed fossils, as in the case of Java man, or maybe 1, as in the case of Piltdown, Piltdown, Nebraska man, or some of these other fossils that are claimed. Now, you might be thinking there are a lot more, but also you have to also keep in mind that many of these fossils, once they were disproved once, they took them out of the limelight and then brought them back years later, simply assigning a different name. And so sometimes you see 5 or 6 names, and it's really only 2 or 3 actual fossil finds. This was something that confused me for a while when I was studying anthropology, and then finally I realized, they're using 3 different names for one collection of fossil scraps. Again, when they talk about these, you think it's a full man because you see a sketch of a full man. But what there actually are is sometimes a tooth and a bit of a skull, or a bit of a skull and 2 teeth and a femur, or something like this. Lucy was exciting because they found 40% of some kind of a skeleton. At least one vertebrae has since been shown to be belonging to a gibbon. So these things are questionable, and that's why I call them claimed transitions. So if Darwin was correct, with the validity of the claimed transitions being a total moot point, if Darwin was correct, you should have an extremely larger number of transitional fossils, and they just aren't there. They just aren't there. And the reason they aren't there is because every time the people who are lying to you bring forth one of these hoax fossils, supported and presented to you largely in the way of a completely creative cartoon, that these hoax fossils require a lot of money to promote. So they have to publish it everywhere in magazines and put it on the cover and talk about it on the news, and they have to present it to you in order to deceive you. That costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of man hours. And then anybody who comes up and strongly resists it, they've got to get rid of that guy, which can mean embarrassing lawsuits and other things. And so it's very expensive, and it can and potentially damaging every time they bring one of these forth. So they don't like to bring forth a lot. So you're only ever going to see every now and then one new find, and eventually in a couple of years it's going to be really clear that it's not an absolute truth, that there are good reasons to question it, and given a little bit more time, it's going to be fully exposed as a complete hoax, and you'll see why it was there, and some kind of a reason will give, and they'll put forth maybe some person as a scapegoat perhaps. But anyway, they're all typically discredited. Again, this is a moot point as far as Darwin. As far as Darwin is concerned, Darwinism is dead, completely debunked. It's garbage science. Or at best, it was a really bad guess. It was a poor guess. He published under a lot of peer pressure, and he should never have. So Darwin is dead.